All right, the final piece of the puzzle. We need to add a like and dislike system, similar to what you see in the mockup here. Let's get started. I'll begin by creating a migration, make migration, and we'll need a likes table. All right. And now I want you to think about this because there's a number of ways we could structure things. First, well, of course, we need to know the ID of the user who liked it. So let's add that here. Next, I need to know the tweet in question. Which tweet did they like? And then lastly, we need some way to differentiate between a like and a dislike. For example, one option would be to have two columns. So something like this. One column if they liked it, another column if they disliked it. Another option would be to treat likes and dislikes as two separate entities and tables entirely. But a third option, which is a little more simple, I think we'll take this route, is to have a tiny integer. So this can be 0 or 1. If it's 0, we will consider that a dislike. If it's a 1, it's a like. All right, and then finally, in terms of the constraints, let me show you a little tip in Laravel 7. So traditionally in Laravel, you might do something like this. You might say, well, the foreign key user ID actually references the ID column on the users table. And if you were to delete that user, let's cascade and delete these records as well. This is the traditional way to do it, but it is a little verbose. So what you can do instead is this. Let's add a constraint and then say on delete cascade. So as it turns out, this is equivalent to setting the foreign key and then also setting up a constraint down here. It's just a little bit of sugar. So I'm going to do the exact same thing for the tweet ID and then reformat. All right, let's go ahead and migrate the database. Now, if I switch over to Table Plus, I want to show you a few things. So first, here's our structure. We have our indexes. So imagine the user with an ID of 1 liked the tweet with an ID of 1. Maybe the user with an ID of 1 disliked the tweet with an ID of 1. Maybe the user with an ID of 2 liked the tweet with an ID of 1. This is the basic shape it's going to take. Okay, so now if you want to see how we might perform our select query, well, of course, you could say select star from likes and give that a run, but it's not really in the format I want. Ideally, I want to know, all right, well, give me the tweet ID, and then I want a column for the total likes for that tweet, and then another column for the total dislikes for that tweet. So here's what you might consider. It sounds like we want to get the sum of all of the likes, but grouped according to each tweet. So it sure sounds like we're going to have a group by tweet ID clause somewhere. Now, if I give it a run, of course it's going to fail because, well, we're selecting star, and that includes non-aggregated columns. So of course we could just stick to this, and now it does an error, but it's not quite what we want. So let's go ahead and get the sum for the liked column, and I'm going to give that a name of likes. And we'll give that a run. Okay, and immediately that works. So if we switch back, we can see the tweet with an ID of 1 was liked 2 times. The tweet with an ID of 2 was liked 0 times. This is correct. So how would we do the inverse now? I also want the sum of the dislikes. Well, think about it. If it's 0, that counts as a dislike. So why don't we just say not liked? It's really simple, isn't it? Tweet with an ID of 1 has 2 likes and 0 dislikes. Just to be sure of ourselves, let's say the user with an ID of 3 disliked the tweet with an ID of 1. And now if we give this a run again, there you go. That has 2 likes and 1 dislike. This is the clause we need. So just so we don't lose it, let's add a query here. And we'll save it. So now you'll find it here, just in case we forget it. But yeah, in terms of performing our query, well, I want those connected to the tweets. So I really want to start with my tweets query, and then for each row, we stack on that extra information. So with that in mind, it sounds like we need a join clause here, but specifically a left join. In this case, we're joining in the likes table, but on the condition that there isn't a match, I always want to favor the left side of the join. I always want tweets. I don't want a scenario where we exclude a tweet from the result set. So left join is what I want. Okay, left join the likes table on the condition that and let's figure out what the matching tissue is, so to speak. I want the tweet ID to match up. Okay. So now if I give it a run, but actually real quick before I do that, notice we have 105 rows. I give it a run, and now there's 107. And notice we have some duplication here. This is because there's a match 2 times. So it sounds like we really want a subquery here. Let's add it here. And we'll effectively reproduce what we had earlier. So let's grab that and then move it over here. And we'll give that query a name of likes. And then again, the connection will be that the likes tweet ID equals the ID of the tweet. And we'll give that one a run. Okay, so now we're back to 105 rows. This is what we want. So notice the first tweet has 2 likes and 1 dislike. This is how we do it. All right, so now that we have this query, I think we're ready to get started. Let's go to our tweet model and begin adding some of this behavior. Of course, a tweet can be liked. So let's set up that relationship. And of course, that's going to be a has-many relationship. Now, if you wanted to be a little more fancy, you could set up a polymorphic relationship, and this would allow many things to be liked. You can like a tweet, or a user, or a blog post. But in our case, you're only ever going to like a tweet, so I'm going to keep it as simple as we can. So we'll set up a like model, and I'll go ahead and create that class. All right, and then we'll have that extend eloquent. Okay. So a tweet can be liked. Let's go ahead and set that one up. And it should be fairly simple. This, likes, and I'll show you a couple ways to do this. So you could start with create, but you may run into a couple issues. But yeah, you may start by saying, well, the user ID will be, and I'm going to hard code the authenticated user, but later I think we will accept the user. And then finally, we need to let it know if it was a like or dislike. So we'll set that to true. But then think about it. We would have another method to dislike. So again, if we have a tweet model, I want to be able to do something like this or this. Okay. So dislike, but it's going to look pretty similar. The only difference would be this. But now, can you think where we might have an issue? What if we have a user and that user likes the tweet and then they also click the dislike button? Okay, well now we have a scenario where there are 2 records. One where they liked it, and another where they disliked it, which makes no sense. So we're going to protect against this in 2 different ways. First, if I go back to the migration, why don't we add a unique constraint, an index? We'll do it right down here. We'll say unique will be, let's see, the user ID and the tweet ID. You can only have 1 record there. So let's add that. So now we're protecting on the SQL end, but I'm going to show you another option here. What if instead of create, we did update or create? This is really useful. And we're going to change it to this, and then I'll explain it. Okay, so this is a little bit different, and I think you may find it's more flexible. Imagine this path. The user likes a particular tweet, but then somehow they try to like it again. All right, well, the first time, do we have a record in the database? No. So we create a new one with this user ID, and then we literally merge in this array as well. All right, so now we have a record. The user calls it the second time, and we check, well, is there a record matching this tweet ID and this user ID? Yes, there already is. So let's go ahead and update it instead, and we'll set liked to true. So now, if we were to do the same thing down here, we get the result of, let's say the user does this, and then this. On the database end, we would create a record, we would set liked to true, and then when we call dislike, well, that record already exists, so we simply update it to set the liked column to false. And that gives us a simple way to toggle it. And then further, this is fine, but if you want to merge it, I'll reformat real quick. You could say liked is true, just assume it will be liked, and then pass this in. And then down here, you could simply defer, but set it to false. Now, generally, I don't like to use Booleans like this because the idea is down the line. You can't remember what false refers to. But I think of that more as user-facing code. These 2 are connected, and it's very clear what I'm doing here. So I'm less worrisome about it as I would be if it was something I was exposing through an API or something like that. Okay, so finally, You can hard code the authenticated user if you want in the model. It always feels a little weird to me. So what I might do, what's nice though, is it gives you that clean API, which I really like. You could change it. You could do something like this, user like tweet. But then again, you're back in that boat where everything makes sense going on the user model, and you end up with these God objects. So what you might consider doing is accepting a user, but not requiring it. And then you could say, well, if you gave us a user, then we will fetch the user ID. Otherwise, we will look into the session. So that gives you that cleaner API, but still the ability to pass in a specific user. Okay, so let's give this a shot. Let's say I have a user, and we have a tweet, and we're going to like that tweet, and I'll pass in that user. Oh, we have an issue here because we forgot to update the like model. I'll just set guarded to an empty array. All right, sorry about that. So let's once again find our user, find our tweet, and then we will have the user like that tweet. But actually, real quick, let's empty this around. Or I'm sorry, empty that out so we can start from scratch. So I give it a run, and if I come back, sure enough, it works. The user with an ID of 1 liked the tweet with an ID of 1. Now let's do the inverse. The user wants to dislike it. And it fails. Yeah, we forgot to accept the user here as well. You were probably thinking that. Anyways, too many mistakes, Jeffrey. So we try it one more time, and now we dislike the tweet. And what you'll see is notice that when I give this a refresh, the updated timestamp will tick. And of course, liked will change to false. Run it, and there we go. Liked is now 0, and we were updated at 1903 instead of 1902. It works. Let's bring it back. Refresh, and there you go. So now, one last thing. It will be useful to check if the user liked a particular tweet. So yet again, you could have it on your user model. So you could say, well, did the user like this tweet? Or you could do it on the tweet model. Is liked by user. And why don't we stick with this so we can keep it all here? We'll do it, I don't know, right down here. Is liked by the given user. So now there's a couple ways we could do this as well. We could go through all of the likes and then find one where the user ID is what you gave us. So this would be kind of the simple way to go about it. The only issue, though, is if you can imagine being in a loop, and for each loop, you're checking if the user liked that particular tweet, you end up with the n+1 problem. And that's something to be aware of. So this is a situation you have to know how you're going to call the method. If I know it's going to be in a loop, I'd rather not do that. What if instead, maybe we can grab it off of users? Maybe a user can access their likes. That is something that we should probably offer on user. And if we eager load it, then for every single tweet, we're not running a brand new database query. We're reading an existing loaded collection. So if you wanted to go that route, this is probably find in lots of cases at high volume, you probably need to switch to something else like Redis instead. But for a demo, I'm okay if it's loaded into a collection. But yeah, again, imagine if a user liked a million different things over their life. You'd have to change it. So anyways, we load it into a collection, but specifically, let's find the one where the tweet ID is, of course, this one, but also where the liked status was true, because I don't want to check if you liked or disliked it. I want to know if you liked it specifically. So let's see, we could do count there and then just return a Boolean and reformat. And then we could do one more for the inverse. So if you want to check if the user disliked the tweet, it's effectively the same thing, but we could update this or again, merge them the way we did earlier, whatever you want. So now if we try this, tinker, and we'll find our user and our tweet. And of course, now I can check if the user, I can check all of the user's likes. And I can see, in this case, the tweet with an ID of 1 was liked by the user. So I could say, was this tweet liked by the user? And it should say yes. If I check, was it disliked? It'll say false. Why don't we change it for the user? Okay. Now, if I say, Is it liked by the user? It should return false. Oh, be careful of this. So it's still returning true because we've already eager loaded the collection. So that is something to be aware of. So for example, if I grab a fresh user instance, it'll change to false. Okay. So now you'll notice on our tweet model, we got a lot of stuff related to likes now. Like, dislike, is liked by, is disliked by, the relationship there. So in these cases, I almost always extract a trait, even if it's only used in a single class. So why don't we call it likable? We'll create that, like so. And then what I'll do is move some of this up. So let's move anything related to likes up to that trait. All right. So now our tweet model remains fairly clean. And then all of this stuff, all of these related methods can be contained here. And there we go. All right. So now I think we're about ready to actually implement this. Now it looks like if I zoom in, my designer forgot to make that a selectable SVG for me. So we're just going to grab something from Zond Icons, from Adam and Steve. And yeah, we're going to look for something like a thumbs up. Here we go. We're going to grab those two. So instead of downloading it, I'm just going to copy it. I hope that's okay. Right click and copy the full HTML and come back. We'll go to our tweet partial. And yeah, right down here, sounds like we're going to have a little footer section. That's really not the footer. Let's change that. It's more like a meta section. And we'll see for each one we have two divs here containing the icon and the number of likes. So we'll have two of these containing the icon. And I think I can I remove that? I think that's okay. I'm not sure what the rules are on that at the moment. And then down here, I think I can set the fill. So let's set that to fill the current color. And then up here, I'm going to start with gray, but then we will swap that out based upon if you have liked it or not. So then down here, we would have the count that I would hard code. We'll give this a little margin right. And then stands to reason we might want to do flex item center here. And yeah, let's have a look. So if we take a look, a little big. So let's bring it back to a width of 3. Yeah, I kind of wish the thumbs up was going the other direction. I guess I could CSS flip it horizontally, but I'm not going to worry about that. The only remaining thing, let's set a class of text extra small, and then gray, and then maybe push it down a little bit from up here. Okay, good enough for me. So now we're going to have two of these, right? We have one for the thumbs up, and then we have another for the thumbs down, or for the dislike. So we need to grab the other SVG. That would be this one here. And then I'll paste that in and do basically the same thing. Again, I hope that's okay. All right, so update that. And then we probably need a little breathing room after this one. So let's have a look. We come back. Oh, and actually real quick, flex on the parent of those two sections. So we come back and this is what we get. Not amazing, but good enough for our demo. So now I want to swap out the placeholders with the actual numbers. So this would be, instead of 10, I want it to be the total number of likes the tweet has received. So you'll remember when we worked on that subquery, we haven't finished that yet, but we know it's going to be something like this: tweet, likes, and then down here, tweet, dislikes. But yeah, at the moment, we don't have that. So if we go to tweets controller, and for example, if we just return the results of that and switch back, sure enough, for each item, we just have the basics of the tweet. Okay, so that's our next step. Let's go back to our tweet model. And what I'm going to do is add a little helper here. Actually, maybe we could put that on likable. This could be a scope called with likes. So what this allows you to do is dynamically build up your queries. So for example, if you say tweet all, that just gives you the basic attributes for all the tweets. But if you wanted to say with the likes, that would then give you the tweets, including the number of likes and the number of dislikes. Okay, so if you want to allow for that, all we have to do is reproduce that query that we played around with. So let's bring that in here. and then I will comment it out. Okay, so we're already working with tweets. I don't need that, but it does sound like we need to add a left join subquery. So with Eloquent, we can do left join sub. And by the way, if you want IntelliSense there, you could type in the query builder. This will be the Eloquent query builder. Okay, so now you could do left join sub as you see there. Okay, so notice we want the query, which is this, as what are we going to name it? We call it likes. That's basically like the table name we are assigning. And then on the condition that the first one equals the second one. All right, really easy because we've already done the work. I can grab this whole thing here. Here's our subquery. We're going to name it likes on the condition that likes.tweetID equals tweets.id. And this is what we get. And there you go. So now we have an optional query scope. If you were to try this, here's the first tweet. We have the basic attributes, but let's load the likes onto it. And now you can see the number of likes and dislikes. Or we could just grab all of the tweets and load that on. And now if it's null, that means nobody has liked or disliked it. But if we go to the top, there you go. All right, so now let's go ahead and remove all of this. And when we load the user's timeline, I'm going to include the likes. So now think about it. We've already added this check here. You could even do something like this. If there is null, then just default to 0, or we could even update the query to return 0 instead of null. But yeah, if we come back to Firefox, give it a refresh, none of these have been liked. But if we go down to that first one, we can see that we disliked that one. So now let's give the user some feedback if they specifically disliked it. Maybe right up here, we could say, well, if the tweet is disliked by the current user, then maybe we'll do something like blue. Otherwise, default to gray. And then, I don't want to repeat that here. Okay, let's do this. Let's apply it to the parent. And then that current color will cascade down to the SVG as well as the span. And if I come back and give it a refresh, there you go. Okay, so now we just have to update this above, change this to if it was liked by the current user, and then the same thing here where we can get rid of that. And I don't think we have any, but if I were to artificially do it, user with an ID of 1 likes the tweet with an ID of 2. Okay, and it works. So now the final piece of the puzzle is to set up the forms here. And we can do this pretty quickly and traditionally. So we'll start with maybe this whole thing can be a form. And if you think about it, this will go to tweets / the ID of the tweet and then like. And then we'll do the same thing down here. We'll do these all at once. This one also will be wrapped like so. The only difference is, let's put these on their own line. This will go to tweets, the same thing actually, but let's submit a delete request. Now, if we scroll down, this will become a button. And the same thing up here. So now I can run this, and it tries to submit a request there, and to delete it, oh, we should update that, shouldn't we? Like so. All right, let's create our endpoint. So let's do it right up here. If you make a post request to tweets, a specific tweet, and like, this will hit a new controller called tweet likes controller. And then we'll do the same for a delete request, and that'll hit a destroy action. All right, let's do it. Make a controller. Let's go there now. And we have two methods. One to store a like for a tweet, and then one to remove it. And this is really easy now. We already have the API, so I can say tweet like by the current user, and this one will be tweet dislike. And that's it. And then we can return back. And I'll let you take a look at that. Pretty simple stuff. All right, let's see if we got it. So we give it a refresh. Let's try to like our own status. It does send us right back to the top because we're doing a full post back, but sure enough, it does work. Now let's try to swap that to a dislike. And you'll see if I come back down, we did update that correctly. Let's do maybe this one like so, and you get the idea. It works. Let's dislike this, and it works. Okay, so now wrapping up. I know I'm moving pretty fast, but it's because we have so much to cover. Let's take this whole section here and move this into something, even a simple component called like, dislike, buttons, or something like that. Or let's just say like buttons. Okay, so let's go into our views, components directory. We'll add a new one here called like buttons. And just to be sure it works, if I refresh, it's gone. But if I paste that in, all of that, come back, refresh. We forgot to pass in the tweet in question, of course. We'll do that here. Come back, refresh, and now it works again. Okay, so we breezed through that. If I missed anything or you want any clarification, please let me know below the video. Last little unrelated thing. You'll notice every page submits a full post back to the server, and you see that load. That's just a reality of server-side applications. But of course, there are ways around it. So you could pull in something like TurboLinks to provide kind of a more modern feel. So for example, if I were to go to our master page, and even if we just pulled in TurboLinks itself and we made no tweaks, we could do that. We could do that through unpackage. You could pull it in through npm, whatever you want. But have a look. Doing that alone and nothing else, if I were to come back and refresh, you'll notice as I click these links, it's much quicker. You're not going to see that loading sign. Profile, explore, home. And again, if that's not there, refresh. Notice you're going to keep seeing that loading spinner. There it is. There it is again. I hope you can see that in the video. It's a little bit slower versus a TurboLinks approach. Explore, profile. Oh yeah, we have to update that, but that's unrelated. Kind of cool. So it handles this by intercepting the links. It submits an AJAX request to the server, and it strips out everything except the body tag and inserts it with JavaScript. So it will make your site feel that much more zippy. Okay, let's fix that, and then let's call it a day. Go to our profile page, and yeah, right here, you'll see it's accepting the tweets, and we pass that through right up here. So yeah, at the point where you keep loading the tweets, you might want to extract this to a repository or even a helper method on your model. We're only doing it, I think, 2 times, so I'm not too worried about it, but it's something to be aware of. Let's add that query scope there. All right, so really great job if you made it this far. I really appreciate it. Now, there will be one last video, but nothing education code related. Instead, I'll give you some ideas for where to go from here. If you want to keep working on Tweety on your own for learning purposes, I'll show you how to do that. I'll give you some ideas for what you might implement next. And then I will also point you toward other series at Laracast that you might enjoy. Stay tuned.